Good evening and welcome. My name is Claire Bishop, and as the Executive Director at American Public Square at Jewel, I'm so pleased to welcome you tonight to the Cost of College, Affordability and Accessibility. This is the final of 4 student programs in the month of April, which is officially designated Student Month here at APS. Tonight's program marks a special milestone for high school students participating in American Public Square at Jewel's Civics Education Initiative. It's the culmination of a program they have been participating in throughout the 2021 school year. First semester brought lesson plans focused on building key skills critical to participating in civil discourse into the classroom, the virtual classroom this year. And the second provided the support to produce the program that you're here for tonight. This subject has been chosen by our students and produced for the benefit of the community at large. I'm so very proud of the work they've done, and I know you will enjoy the thoughtful program that they've put together tonight. In just a moment, I'm going to be handing the virtual mic over to Dr. Elizabeth McLeod-Walls, President of William Jewell College, the academic home to APS and an incredible partner on our student programs. But before I do, I want to give my profound thanks to the many people and organizations who have made this program and all of our student work possible. First, I want to express gratitude to the funders of the APS Civics Education Initiative, the Oppenstein Brothers Foundation, the Sherman Family Foundation, the McDonald Foundation, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and the Ulch Family Fund. I'd also like to thank APS staff and particularly our Student Initiative Coordinator, Ms. Allison Kelzer. Allison has worked tirelessly to adapt the pilot program in this pandemic year to provide meaningful instruction and a powerful experience to participating students. Allison, your dedication to this work has really inspired me this year. I'd also like to thank our panelists and participants in tonight's program, as well as the team of educators and administrators who have offered their insight, advice, and support on our student programs as we've been planning and implementing this year. A special shout out to Chris Odom and Emily Wegner, who have been our biggest champions in getting the student initiative underway. And finally, a huge tip of the hat tonight to our students. It is an understatement to say that this has been a year like no other, and through it all, you have remained committed to and deeply engaged in this effort. So tonight is your night. Thank you for your hard work and service to your community. Students participating tonight include students from the Barstow School, Crossroads Preparatory Academy, and as a proud Paseo pirate myself, I want to give a special shout out to students participating tonight from Paseo Academy of Fine and Performing Arts. With that, Dr. McLeod-Walls, I'm going to hand the virtual mic over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Claire. I'm so pleased to be with you here this evening, representing William Jewell College, the proud academic home to American Public Square. One of the reasons that Jewell embraced this partnership with American Public Square is because of APS's commitment to objective civil discourse grounded in critical thinking. And as the critical thinking college, William Jewell also is a place for reason, discussion, and intellectual curiosity. But we, like American Public Square, also challenge ourselves to be relevant and responsive to the pressing issues of our day. College affordability and student debt are among those pressing issues, which is why William Jewell took the step of looking at our tuition price through an equity lens, realizing that as one of the most expensive private colleges in the Kansas City region, we were neither solving inequities in educational attainment, nor were we addressing the climbing costs of college. So in response to this realization, and in response to our commitment to equity, we chose to act. Starting in the fall of 2021, our tuition will be reduced almost by half, and we will continue to offer academic, athletic, and access scholarships, making what we believe is the finest college education in the region truly affordable for all. We are grateful to American Public Square at Jewell for challenging all of us to think deeply about our assumptions and to interrogate our actions. We are a better region thanks to their fine work. It is now my sincere pleasure to introduce the moderator of tonight's panel discussion, Dr. Rodney Smith. Dr. Smith has devoted his life to ensuring student access and belongingness within higher education. He has worked directly with students whose lives were changed through their attainment of a college degree, and students who unfortunately could not reach their dreams due to financial hardship. Today, I am proud to say that he serves as the founding vice president for access and engagement at William Jewell, where he assists students in reaching their goals and embracing lives of vibrancy and purpose. Dr. Smith, I am honored to introduce you to the group gathered here this evening. The remainder of the evening now is in your very capable hands.
Thank you, Dr. McLeod-Walls. Thank you for such a warm introduction. Thank you. I am honored to be your moderator this evening, to have this wonderful conversation with a wonderful group of panelists to talk about the topic of the cost of college, affordability or accessibility, which I think is an important conversation. And even in Dr. McLeod-Walls' introduction of me, it caused me to go back through memories as she was just saying those things, and actually thinking about my best friend in college, who unfortunately never completed college because of affordability. And so that's why it's a topic that is so important to me. And so I'm so excited and eager to get to this conversation with the wonderful panelists that we had before you. But before we get to the panelists, just give a shout out to Allison Kelzer, who put this program together. As Claire said, she is APS's student initiative coordinator, and she'll be our roving reporter tonight, and she'll be asking questions on behalf of the audience and on behalf of our students from Paseo Academy of Fine and Performing Arts, as well as the Crossroads Preparatory Academy, as well as the Barstow School. And we have as our fact checker this evening, a young lady by the name of Luz Marino Chepe, who is a political science student at UMKC and is serving as a intern with American Public Square. And so if you have questions during the program tonight, please utilize the Q&A feature in chat. And also, I think we're live streaming on Facebook, and so you can ask your questions that way as well. And so, and then as well, we have a fact sheet for tonight's program, and you can find that at www.americanpublicsquare.org/events. And then I think that at some point we'll drop it in the chat as well before the night's over. So let's kick the conversation off with me introducing our panelists for tonight. And so first, I'm delighted to introduce this young lady, Michelle Watley. I happen to know Michelle from the community. She is really good friends with my wife. And I know Dr. McLeod-Walls is thinking, it's like, Rodney, you know everybody in the city. Well, it's because of my wife. My wife knows everybody, and I know everybody through her. I'm just simply known as Stephenie's husband. But no, Michelle is a good friend of ours. She is an industry expert practitioner for more than 15 years as a political strategist and community specialist. She is the founder of a very important organization by the name of Shirley's Kitchen Cabinet, a nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to amplifying the voices and power of Black women through education and advocacy. Shirley's Kitchen works to wield the collective power of Black women, providing training and position Black women for seats at decision-making tables. So welcome, Michelle Watley, to the panel.
Thank you, Stephenie's husband.
AKA
Dr. Rodney Smith.
Yes, I welcome that title because I married well. So next we have to the panel, Monsignor Stewart Swetland, a rock star of a guy. In preparation for tonight's evening, I had an opportunity to talk to this gentleman, and he is one impressive guy. He's the current president of Donnelly College. He's also an ordained priest, dating back to 1991. He also received his undergraduate degree in physics from the United States Naval Academy. That's quite impressive, young people, if you don't know already. So let me inform you, that is impressive, as well as was elected to be a Rhodes Scholar in 1981 as he entered the Catholic Church while he studied politics, philosophy, and economics at Oxford, where he got a BA and an MA, and then went on to get a MDiv, a Master's in Divinity, and a Master's of Art from Mount St. Mary's Seminary. He is the current 7th president of Donnelly College, the most diverse college in the Midwest. I did not know that until now, which is located in Kansas City, Kansas, and where he also serves as a professor of leadership and Christian ethics. So welcome Monsignor Stewart to the panel. And next we have Josh Burdette. And Josh is in his 15th year at University Academy, where he, for the past 7 years, has served as the college advisor. In that role entails teaching both junior and senior seminar courses, where topics range from college terminology to an application process, to college readiness skills, ACT preparation, all those kinds of things. Prior to moving into this role, Josh taught mathematics, and even prior to moving into high school, at the high school level, he worked as a resident at the residence life at UMKC and at MTSU. I'm surprised, Josh, that our paths haven't crossed before now, because I used to work at UMKC as well. I come from Tennessee. I worked at Belmont, but I have friends that are still working at MTSU to this day. So welcome, Josh. And then finally, we have Mr. Preston Cooper, who is a visiting fellow at the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity, where he studies the economics of higher education. Formerly, he worked at the American Enterprise Institute and the Manhattan Institute. He is a regular contributor to Forbes magazine and is written for Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Seattle Times, the U.S. News and World Report, the Washington Examiner, and the National Review. Wow, pretty impressive. This is an impressive panel. So I'm excited to get into this conversation with you all about the cost of college. And I'm gonna read something that I didn't know about that's listed here. And yeah, as you see me looking up, I'm looking at my iPad and I'm using two. I'm trying to be cool with the technology tonight. My son would be proud of me that I'm using an iPad and a laptop.
Be proud of you too.
Yes, for an old guy, I'm doing pretty good tonight with this technology. So the College Board shows that the price of tuition has inflated 278% in the past 30 years. That is just mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing, leaving many of us crippled with loan debt. Again, like I said about my best friend from college, never completed the process because of affordability. And then it also causes many of us to make decisions on whether we are going to college, accessibility, can we afford it, all those kinds of things. So it is, quite interesting that our cost of college has gone up so much in the past 30 years. I just want to get your reactions to that before we get into some real questions about, who you are, and those kinds of things. So perhaps I'll start with Preston. What do you think is driving that has caused a 278% increase in college costs over the past 30 years? We'll start with you, Preston.
Thanks, Rodney, and thanks to everyone at American Public Square for putting together this great event tonight. So cost of college obviously is a question forefront of everybody's mind. Rodney mentioned 278% increase over the past 30 years, which is, like you said, mind-boggling, mind-blowing. So about this 278% increase, I have some good news and I have some bad news. So the good news is that 278% increase refers to what we call the sticker price of college. And that is basically, you go to a college's website, you see the tuition number that's listed there. That's the sticker price. That's the price they advertise. And the good news is that colleges also offer financial aid, and financial aid has also gone up a lot over that time, a pretty significant amount, and so has government aid. So government aid like the Pell Grant and state grant programs like Georgia's Hope Scholarship and California's Cal Grant, they've also gone up a lot. So the net price that you'll pay after all that aid is applied has gone up less. The bad news is that's gone up too. It's gone up less. It's gone up about 80% in the last 20 years, which is not 278%, but it's not zero either. So like you said, Rodney, that means that more students are relying on student loans to pay their tuition. That we've seen the rate of people taking out loans go from about, I think, 45% in the mid 90s, and now it's about 70% today. And when we talk about student debt, I mean, student debt is sometimes this, very, very scary prospect that for some people. But I would encourage, there's probably a number of high school students out in the audience right now. I would encourage people to think of student debt not necessarily as this horrible thing, but just as a tool that comes with certain costs and certain benefits. And for some people, yes, it does end up with some pretty severe consequences, but can also be a tool to, if as a form of is just as a way for people to help cover the cost of college, to cover their tuition, to cover their living expenses. And statistics show that, if you are able to graduate, if you are doing good academic work and you graduate, you choose a good program, you choose a good college, you find a good major, and you graduate into a well-paying job, most of those people in that category will be able to make some good progress on paying off their student debt. I mean, their student debt is probably still too high because the cost of college is too high. But I want to make sure that that we know that student debt doesn't necessarily have to be a lifetime ball and chain. Where it really tends to have some problems for some people is where people are not able to finish college and then they're stuck with the debt, but they don't have the degree to get the commensurate earnings that enable them to pay off the debt. So in summary, cost of college has gone up a lot. Fortunately, the headline numbers overstate things a little bit because financial aid has also gone up a fair amount, but it is probably still something to worry about.
Wow. So yeah, your response, it makes me think about, even what Dr. McLeod-Walls talked about in her introduction, that we at Jewel have gone through a tuition recast is what we call it, where we are, there was a sticker price that we were advertising, if you will, that wasn't exactly what people with families end up being responsible for because of discounts and because of aid, because of scholarships and that. And so we thought, why not reduce publish more or less the actual cost that people are paying, which we see it as an equity effort. We see it as an equity effort where I think prior to us doing that, we may have been, not making ourselves available to middle-class families. They would look at the sticker price and keep moving because it's like, well, no, surely I can't afford that. So they would go elsewhere and look at costs. And then, why it also is an equity issue, because you have to you have to factor in this notion of race and socioeconomic status. And so we have our first question in the Q&A, and I'll just read it as we go through it, and then I'll probably just toss it to any one of you. Maybe perhaps Michelle, we can address this, and then whoever else wants to jump into it. I think the young lady's name is Ruth asked the question. She said, there's aid available, but how do we address the issue of disparity and what kids and parents know about and how it tends to skew according to race and socioeconomic status? So what is your reaction to that question, Michelle?
Yeah, that's a great question. And even to Preston's point, if you choose the right degree program and you're able to apply for scholarships and you're able to, after graduating and doing all of the things that you have to do to get a job that likely needs to pay six figures in order for you to pay back the loans that you take out, you may be positioned to pay those loans off and they not become a financial burden or economic burden to you achieving the American dream. But the likelihood of that is very difficult. Most students who graduate, the starting income is hovering around $49,000, $50,000 a year. And that sounds like a lot of money, but when you're taking on debt that equates to a mortgage or PW, that's not a lot of money. And that's usually not enough to pay down the student loan debt in a way that allows you to have disposable income to pay for the things that you need to pay for so that you can start living the American dream, so that you can get married, so that you can buy a home, so that you can become financially stable. And when we talk about scholarships, scholarships also have criteria. You have to have a certain GPA. You had to take in so many courses, and those opportunities may not be as readily available for students within low income brackets, or students of color, or students from disadvantaged communities. I was a student who was part of the A+ program. I was a student who had decent grades, but still could not afford to go to my dream schools, to go to Dillard, to go to Howard, to go to Spelman. And so I was forced to choose another path because of my personal circumstances, and because I didn't have the support system that was needed to ensure that I was prepared and ready for college, to go after the scholarships, to be prepared, to have to practice and test for the ACT or the SAT, and to position myself to be a competitive student when seeking scholarships and monies to go to college. Although I had been a very active student, I was a very smart student. I had overcome all kinds of challenges. I think I came into high school with high school credits from taking courses during middle school to ensure that I could graduate early, and that still was not enough. So when we talk about professional, and Rodney, let me know if I got the question wrong, but I think the question is how do you overcome the disparities that are present in the system, both in college preparedness, before you go to college, while you're in college, and then when you graduate. And I think there are a number of actions that need to be taken by governmental entities, colleges and universities, ways that we can better educate parents who have children who are seeking to go to college, and then ensuring that our students know that college is not the only way. I ended up becoming a carpenter with the Carpenters Union. I didn't go to college right away.
Wow.
I worked for J.E. Dunn Construction for about 5 years, was asked to be superintendent. And through that experience, learned a number of skills that allowed me to be successful in the realm that I'm successful in now. And we don't often talk about trade schools. And although the cost of trade schools has increased exponentially also, it's a lot cheaper than four-year schools. And these are skills that you can utilize no matter what happens in the world. If I decide today that I'm done with politics and communications and nonprofit work, I can go down to the Union Hall and pick up my hammer and tools and tool belt and go right back to work and be making anywhere between $60,000, to $70,000 a year, which is, a livable wage. So I think there are a lot of different avenues that need to be taken to create change. And hopefully through this discussion, we can highlight more of those more directly.
Yeah. And that's wonderful. Yeah, you're right. You probably could make more than that, if you decided to go back into that industry. I did not know that about you. That's quite interesting.
I had a boyfriend at the time who was working at Quick Trip, and he was making $60,000 a year. And between our two salaries, we were making 6 digits a year. As folks who had just graduated from high school, were not far removed from high school. He worked at a gas station. I was a carpenter. And had we not chosen to go to college and continued on those paths, we would still be making a livable wage and be able to afford a mortgage and take care of kids. So we got to present our students with options so that they are best prepared to go down the paths that may be of interest to them. Everybody doesn't want to go to college, and that's okay. But you can still make a living and live the American dream if you decide not to go that route. And what does that look like? And how do we, present that as an option for students?
Yeah, that's something I think about a lot, even as an academician. I think I've come to the conclusion that is indeed true. What you said, that college may not be the natural next step for everybody. Even though I'm an academician, I've spent my entire career in the academy. But I think ultimately, education doesn't always have to be formal, right? Because at the end of the day, I think the true definition of education, I think as Greek philosophers understood it and tried to share with us, is that it's the discovery of self, discovery of who you are. Ultimately, I think is the ultimate goal of education. So it may not take the formal route, if you will, as long as you, in the end, discover who you are. So I think that's a beautiful thing. So Monsignor, along the same vein of where we're talking about this notion of, diversity, you serving at the most diverse college in the Midwest. So how's your institution navigated this tuition inflation over the last few years, and
Well, I'm
how's
originally
it
from the
seen
East
to
Coast,
impact
so
your students?
I love to start when I'm visiting my friends on the East Coast or raising money on the coast to say, if you think diversity, think Kansas, being the most diverse college in the Midwest. That's usually gets a laugh and gets them going. People don't recognize the great diversity that makes up this metro area.
Yeah.
But Donnelly was founded with the idea that there needed to be institutions that serve, especially those who are first generation college students. And unfortunately, because the inequities historically, that often means that we're drawing from populations that were underserved. And that's why we have such diversity here, among other reasons. We keep our tuition really low, but we do so by eliminating some of the things we don't think are essential to the college experience. So we don't have intercollegiate athletics, for example, at Donnelly College. And we're a commuter school, meaning we don't run dormitories, which can be very expensive. One of the areas that have hugely inflated the cost of going to college is the cost of living at a residential college. So our tuition is we're the lowest private school east of the Rockies. The only ones in the entire country that are less expensive than we are the BYU system in Utah, Idaho, and Hawaii. So we're the fourth least expensive private college in the country, the least expensive college east of the Rockies. And that's by choice because of how we focus on keeping costs low. So it costs about $7,500 full tuition to go here for a year. So it can be done, but choices have to be made and what the marketplace demands. I've served at 4 other universities, the last 3, Bradley University, University of Illinois, and Mount St. Mary's University, 3 very diverse types of colleges. And I saw a huge switch in what people demanded. When I started, dormitories had many people in the same room. The shower was down the end of the hall, and the cafeteria served 1 choice or maybe 2, and that was it. Now, of course, most colleges have a whole buffet system in their dining halls with multiple choices, and the private rooms, showers and baths in the rooms. These are not unusual things now. So when you're comparing price, you also have to say, what are we demanding of college? And that's what I say to parents, be very discerning. And I say to young people, very, very discerning. I don't think anyone in undergraduate should take on debt more than a Honda Civic in their undergraduate, because a car payment you can handle coming out of college with an undergraduate degree or an associate degree. You can't handle a mortgage payment on that. So I think it's important that we don't put that kind of burden. Now at Donnelly, we will not turn anyone away because they can't afford. So if you're really having trouble, a place like Donnelly is a place to start and to look at. And our graduates go on to doing great things. But I think it's up to colleges, and I applaud William Jewell for what you're doing, that you make that decision that we have a moral obligation to our students not to give them a debt they cannot handle. And that's especially true on the places that load people up with debt and have a very low graduation rate. That's not fair to them, and that's an injustice to our society because that's debt that probably won't be paid back. Only 11% of the students at Donnelly take any debt at all while they're here. And most of those students are our nursing students who are going right into career in nursing, where they'll be able to easily pay back the small debts they have.
Wow. Wow. Yes, Allison, I was just thinking about you. I'm glad you showed up on the screen as a
I must have heard
report.
you.
You heard
That
my
is-
thoughts. But that I was just in awe of what Monsignor just shared with us, that the low rate of students who are leaving his institution with that, which is a beautiful thing, because it allows students to jump into society and begin to be productive citizens and be able to provide for their families in the way that they would want to. Yeah. So what's on your mind, Allison? What kind of questions do you have for us from the audience?
Yeah, I'm excited to bring Josh in here from University Academy, because I think a big piece of this conversation has to do with financial literacy and what's happening for students before they get to the higher education institution or before they go maybe to shop around for schools or to just find out what's a good fit for them. And University Academy here in Kansas City has a unique story and model to preparing their students in their upper school. So Josh, we'd love to hear what that model looks like, and we can get in more to some questions about what the curriculum looks like later on. But if you want to give us an overview and see what the panel thinks about that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I was just going to toss it to Josh because I think Josh has a unique experience where he's had the vantage point of seeing it from a higher education level and what students perhaps are dealing with coming from high school, and then now you're dealing with high school students. So yes, talk to us about your experience at University Academy.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I do have to apologize. My neighbor is mowing, so in the background, unplanned. So I do apologize about that.
No, we can't hear it. I can't.
Okay, good. So at UA, we were very college prep focused, and as part of that, and I cannot take credit for starting this. We had some very incredible thinking board members and founding members of our school and administrators that said, we want to take the college counseling piece and make sure that it happens. We want to leave a little bit less up to chance. And so the idea was that we're going to create a container for that college counseling. And that's where the senior seminar course comes into play. All of our seniors go through that course. And then a little while later, someone who held the advisor position before me said, it would be really nice if we could actually start this process 1 year earlier. And so junior seminar was born. And the idea behind the course is that it's a container for all of the pieces of the puzzle that students need to know. As you mentioned, Dr. Smith, having worked at the college campuses and all of us who've kind of navigated through, there's a certain alphabet soup that goes with every university. There's terminology that you need to know for admissions. And I tell my students all the time, like, you're going to need to know this for 2 years. And then when you get to college, then you don't have to worry about it anymore. And then there's a whole nother set of terminology and jargon that comes with it. And so in that course, we really spend a lot of time talking about how admissions works, how things are factored in. And then also we spend time talking about some of the things that we've been discussing today on what is the net price for a school, not being thrown by sticker price. Also, we spend time talking about the different kinds of loans, what's the amounts of federal loans and private loans and what that means. And it's interesting, having gone through this now in my 7th year, our students, I feel like those would have been the students that if they were moving into my building, they would have a leg up on the rest of the students, because they would know going in, okay, these are the things that I need to know. I won't go too far into the curriculum, but I think that one of the things that is important about UA as well is that because we're a college prep model, we are very much from kindergarten all the way through high school and into alumni, working to give our students that support to the point where, I tell admissions counselors, like, I don't make the sell on college or institutions of higher education, whatever that may be, because our students are there. But then also we have a supporting organization, the University Academy Foundation, that is there to help students get through college. All of us that have worked at the college level know that there are things that are unforeseen circumstances that sometimes keep a student from progressing. They stop out. And the University Academy Foundation, since its inception, has been really instrumental in keeping students in school and helping them to graduate. And we're at a spot now where, our school, this is our 21st year. We have graduates that are starting to give back and providing mentoring for alumni, mentoring for college students, and also trying to connect our students into the workforce in general.
Yeah. Yeah, this notion of, debt that students will most definitely incur. I often tell students, like, make sure that, you're leaving the school with the other word that starts with a D, meaning a degree, because you will, you will leave with debt. It's just, even students who have, decent scholarships will still, leave with some debt. In fact, we have a daughter who Michelle knows, and she interned with Michelle, who's a freshman at Howard, and Howard is not inexpensive. It's pretty pricey, and even though she's done well, she did well in high school and had some scholarship offers, it's still a significant amount that we're responsible for as a family. And so, our big push is to make sure that you complete the process, because you will have debt. And I see an interesting, question in our chat that says the overwhelming majority of student debt defaults are among those who didn't finish.
Right, Rodney, that's exactly right. I mean, I want to say preach it, because a little amen from the corner here, because that is the worst thing you can do, is take on the debt and not get the degree. So finish what you start is very important. I used to work in a seminary for one of my jobs. And even there, I would say to a student who's discerned out, doesn't believe they're called to the ministry, to get that degree, that academic degree, because you can use that and it's proof of what you're doing. So I really think that's important for people to see, that you can always change majors and do all that, but get a degree once you start. So that means discerning that you're certain you want to get a degree before you start in to the college experience. So I think that's very important and you want that whatever place you go to really help you. And the other thing I would say is discern. There's lots of ways to get college paid for in creative ways. If you look hard, there's work colleges out there that will help you have work and college. We're trying to do some of that here at Donley. There's also always different programs that, if you are willing to serve after you finish, that will help pay for college. Obviously, I went to the Naval Academy. I gave 6 years to the military after I finished my education to pay back that commitment, but that was paid for me. So there's ways of doing it that, again, you have to look at your own calling, your own vocation, but you can be creative and find ways of knocking that price down or making it more accessible and affordable.
I would add to that, even just being strategic about the next job that you take. There are a lot of employers that will pay for you to get a graduate degree or provide tuition assistance. And so instead of going right into a graduate degree after you complete your undergrad, maybe it's finding a job that will offset those costs. Employers are also starting to help pay back student loans as an incentive for new employees. And so asking if that's a benefit that an employer can offer. But when we talk about defaulting, as was mentioned, you're more likely to default when you don't complete the program. And there's statistics that say that up to 70% of Black students are likely to eventually default on their loans. And so you've taken on the debt of a mortgage or a BMW, you've defaulted, and now a whole other set of economic obstacles that prevent you from having economic prosperity arise. It's an impact on your credit score and your ability to get loans for mortgages and car loans and everything else. It impacts your insurance. It impacts so many things when you have defaulted student loans on your record. So we really got to work to figure out how we can make college not only affordable, but ensure that communities, students, parents are prepared for their students to take on that loan and debt. I think it's just difficult for a 20, 19, 18, 17-year-old to be positioned to take on the debt of a mortgage in order to get an education. But maybe that's just me, but I think that the system in itself that mandates the student has to make that type of financial decision when they're not even old enough to smoke cigarettes legally is a problem in itself that we need to deal with.
No, absolutely. You're so correct. I say a very similar thing, if not the same exact thing. We are asking these students to have a lot of things figured out, and they're 18, 17, 18 years old. So it speaks to this notion of, and a lot of what you said and a lot of what Monsignor said speaks to this notion of financial literacy. You know what I mean? Just knowing finances like that. So we're going to come back to that, but I want to toss it to Luce if she has any, our fact checker, if she has anything to offer us that's going on in the web world.
Hi, Ronnie. I don't have any requested fact checks from the audience yet, but I do want to remind the audience that they can request a fact check via the Q&A featured on Zoom. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Luce. So back to this notion of financial literacy, whose responsibility is it to teach families about, who bears the responsibility to teach families about, that question can be to Josh, that question could be to Preston, it could be to, of course, Monsignor. Whose responsibility? Who bears the responsibility to incoming students related to teaching, financial literacy?
Sure. Well, I'll jump in here for a second. So surveys show, people who are undergraduates who take on student debt often are not fully aware of some of the features associated with that debt. So one of the things that you're able to do if you have federal student loans is enroll in an income-driven repayment plan. And this is basically a plan that will enable you to link your loan payments directly to your income. And if you have no income or you're at poverty level wages, then your payments are going to be set to zero. But surveys show that only about 40% of undergraduate borrowers are actually aware that this plan exists, and which is really, terrifying, because a number of people who are defaulting on their student loans might not necessarily be aware that there is this plan out there available that can lower their monthly payments to zero and significantly decrease their financial stress. So, I mean, I would say part of the responsibility does rest with the federal government, which is the one giving out 90% of the loans in the first place to students. And another thing that I want to note is that the other kind of tragedy of student loan default is that people who default on a student loan, the median amount that people default on is only about $5,000 or $10,000. It's not very much. And that's because most people who drop out of college and then default on their student loans only go to college for 1 semester or 2 or maybe 3. And, and most people are going to public colleges. So, the tuition isn't that high. And so most of them are only ending up with about $5,000 or $10,000 of debt. But it's the fact that they're not getting the degree. It's the fact that they're not graduating. So they're stuck with the more lower level wages. They haven't gotten the degree that will enable them to command a higher wage in the labor market. And it's that combination that is really, really problematic. Even for undergraduates who do graduate, the median debt is about $30,000. Default rates are much lower for people who do get bachelor's degrees. And where we do really see the mortgage level debts, where that really comes up, is the people who go on to graduate school. Because if you get a master's degree or a law degree, I mean, that is where, the $100,000, $200,000 debts are showing up. And that's where I think, the federal student loan program has really gone off the rails, because at the graduate level, the federal government will basically allow you to borrow unlimited amounts. At the undergraduate level, there are some limits, but at the graduate level, it's basically unlimited. And that's where I think, some of the biggest failings are, because we are allowing students, to take on $200,000, $300,000 of debt. There was one article in the Wall Street Journal a few months back showing a person who went to dental school and took on $1 million of debt. I mean, this is just ridiculous. I mean, we're not going to solve this problem unless there are, some common sense caps on how much you can borrow, and also just some common sense restrictions on what kind of schools are going to be eligible for the federal student loan program. I mean, if we're making loans to schools where the graduation rate is 10 or 20%, I kind of think that's criminal. I don't think that we should be subsidizing students to go to quite frankly, dropout factories like that.
Yeah, your response makes me think about a couple of questions that is in the Q&A about, professional schools in particular. Are there any solutions out there percolating that would address this? I didn't realize that, and I'm in higher education, didn't realize that there's no cap on professional school, or how much you can borrow against professional schools. And I have some friends. I remember, that's funny you said it now, I do remember a friend back in Nashville who had just finished medical school. And, he's a successful physician now, but he was just saying that, man, I'm gonna have to work until I'm 85 years old to pay off this debt that I've incurred as a result of going to medical school. So are there any solutions out there that perhaps?
Well, yeah, if I could throw out, first of all, it's still a good investment for most people to get post-high school education. I haven't done this in a while. I was glad this talk came up because it forced me to go back and put my economic hat on, my economist hat on, and do some number crunching. And using Department of Labor statistics from 2019 on earnings, the difference of the average person in wages between a high school degree worker and someone who has a bachelor's degree, be that a BA or BS, over the lifetime of their earnings is $1 million. So it's, your investment in getting an undergraduate degree is worth $1 million in lifetime earning as of 2019. That means taking on some debt for $1 million payback, payoff down the road is not a bad thing.
It's worth it. Yeah.
It's worth it. And if you go up to the professional degree, it's 2.32 million over your lifetime. Those who get professional degrees, that's law and medicine and dentistry and all of that. So it's worth it if you finish. And if you go then and translate that education into a vocation that is of lifelong service. So I think it's still a great investment, and it's still, we need it. According to the department here in Kansas, Department of Education, 65% of the jobs in Kansas, and I verified that, that's pretty much the national average, going forward from 2020 on, are going to need a post-high school qualification of some sort. 65%. That means there's only 35% of the jobs aren't. They're great jobs that don't need it. College isn't for everyone, but I will say this, lifelong learning is for everyone. And part of lifelong learning is financial literacy. And that's just as important as other kinds of literacy. So we all have the obligations, parents, students, their formators, their teachers, their educators, to help people be financially literate. But we're all in this as lifelong learners, no matter if we go to college or not. College is just one great place to learn how to be a great lifelong learner.
Yeah.
Go
ahead, Michelle.
Dr. Smith, I think you're right in that it is worth it if you're able to graduate and use it, and if the job market is able to meet you where your educational level is. I think back to 2008, where I had friends who had graduated from law school and then found themselves in that Depression era timeframe in which law firms laid off masses of people across the US, and students like my friends who had just finished law school and took on mortgage level debt were not able to find a job in a law firm that would allow them to pay back those loans expeditiously. They were taking jobs with law firms that were only paying $19 and $20 an hour, and they were saddled with student loan debt payments that were $4,000 a month. You read stories about students who had graduated from law school and had these highly technical degrees who were ended up having to work at Starbucks to make ends meet. And so, yes, it's helpful if you're able to graduate and to find a job, but that hasn't always been the case, particularly for millennials who are saddled with debt and having to deal with all kinds of worldly circumstances that other generations are not, including the rising cost of college. And so, again, I think that, yes, you should, if college is for you, know the degree that you want to go into, do the work and finish, but be prepared for a market that may not be able to provide you a job that allows you to pay back those loans. When you look at the higher end of the average rate of income that a student makes when they get out, those degrees are usually scientific, mathematical based. And so if you get a communications degree, as I did, you may not be making that $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. And so you have to be prepared for what that may mean for your financial and economic stability when you graduate.
Yeah. Yeah, it dovetails in a question that I want to go to next, but I'm going to go to Allison.
Yeah, we have a great question from the audience about preparing students to choose a career too, because not only do they need to be prepared to take out and understand what it means to take out money, they also might not know who they are in this world, and having to choose who you want to be 4 years down the road is a big question. So this is what the question reads, and I want to welcome each panelist to weigh in, because I think from each of your point of views, especially Preston and Josh, Preston, you being able to potentially provide some data on how this affects student debt. But we're looking to answer the question, is there any kind of move toward increasing not only the financial knowledge of incoming juniors and seniors, but also helping them to choose majors that they can stick with or give flexibility in job markets after college? Josh, I think you should answer first.
So it's interesting that question comes up, because that's literally what we're doing right now in my junior seminar course. I think that there's a need to work with students to begin to identify what it is that they want to do. And even, and we talk a lot about in class that we know that the development is a continuum, and that we kind of shift around. My undergraduate's in engineering, and obviously I'm not an engineer right now. But at the same time, I think that there's an important aspect of working with students to even just show them the tools that are out there. As far as helping students to identify what it is that they want to do, whether that be, using the myriad interest profilers that are out there, using all of the things that are available on ONET, to even just, picking up a copy of What Color is Your Parachute, the Bowles text to help students to start to identify that, because what happens a lot of times and I have in fairness, a very small population that I work with. I'm not in a large public school, but in working with those students, many times they will say, this is what I want to do, without really kind of thinking through what that job entails. And so that's a big part of what we do in class. And that's part of their project to begin to understand, okay, what is the daily life of this occupation? What's the requirement of this occupation? And many times in the process of that, in the process of that research, it's been very eye-opening to students to say, oh, okay, I didn't realize that's what this entailed. Looking at the Occupational Outlook Handbook to know, like, okay, what's the projection on these different occupations? Because when we have students who are going to college with even not a dead set major, but like they have a really good idea of what their outcomes are, we see degree completion go up. And it's actually one of the coolest parts about UA is that we have a very strong alumni base. And our students will come back and hop into class and talk with my current students, and they'll check in with me. But it's neat to see them, that work that we do in class actually coming to fruition 4, 5, 6 years down the line, so that I have students who are accountants who decided that they wanted to be an accountant when they were a junior in my class, identifying, I really like marketing. I thought that I wanted to do a different form of business, and that's the case. The number of students that I have actually in the nursing profession who have worked through that. So I apologize for the lengthy answer, but I do think that that's a really integral part of learning this. One of the things that I talk with my students a lot is asking questions. Ask questions of folks in industry. Every college campus for students that are on campus has a career placement office that can help to work with students on how do I begin to identify what it is that I want to do. So anyway, I think that that's I will stop my answer there because I could drone on for the next hour, but I do think it's an important aspect of this.
Yeah, No, I think man, you hit a lot of important points. I think one of the last points you made was, a word of advice that I often give students and things that I wish that we would do a better job in the higher education community, as someone who's been in the academy for 25 years, of allowing students to literally, we talk about this notion of going to college to find yourself, but we expect students to know themselves before that process happens. So, I'm always encouraging students to take an opportunity to visit with your future self. If there's a profession that you think you want to go into, go and shadow somebody that's doing that. Again, visiting your future self. That's what internships are all about, ensuring that students can figure it out. And it also ties back into some things that Michelle said with regard to, I was thinking about, 2008 was a rough year, and we lost a lot of jobs. But as we're continuing, still, even today, we're recovering from that loss. But some of those jobs that we lost, we will never recover those jobs because they're new jobs. Some of those jobs have become obsolete, and it makes me think of a question that one of our anonymous attendees have asked about this. What should colleges, help, should institutions help students project and or limit new students into going to certain majors because they know that perhaps those areas are becoming obsolete. But the challenge is, I guess I'm answering my own question, but the challenge is, how do you know what the future is going to hold? Because there are jobs today that we have that we didn't have in 2008. I mean, for God's sake, we're having this conversation on Zoom. That job did not, that job did not exist in 2008, right? So whose responsibility? What should colleges do? I don't know if there's an answer to that question.
Well, that's why I talk about teaching people how to be lifelong learners, because you're right about that many changes. When I started school way back when in last millennium, they talked about 4 major career changes. Now they talk about something in double-digit figures sometimes. Right now, according to Georgetown, the biggest demands is for STEM, critical thinking skills, analysis of text and data, communication, and the 5th one's interesting, active listening. Those are the skill sets that the jobs that are out there for this year's graduates include. STEM's obvious. If you can do STEM, you should be in it. But the other things all are things that you develop through your college experience in learning how to analyze text, how to critically analyze arguments, how to use data and use it well. But those last 2, communication and active listening, think of all the mental health jobs that are going to be there because of this year. I know that my students, my staff, myself, we all need that little help with mental health, right? That's a huge area of active listening and the ability to communicate and have empathy. Those are things, again, you learn through the interaction. A good college is doing that, is helping you learn these skills. And these are lifelong skills. The particular jobs may change, but these skills go with you throughout life.
But I think Rodney raises a good point. Like, how do we forecast what areas, what sectors are dying out? If you had talked to journalists maybe 15 years ago, they would have never assumed that journalism would die out. We have in our state one of the greatest journalism schools in the nation, but journalism is no longer the sector in which you can see that people are going into because it's a dying career path. When you look at what's even happening with fast food restaurants and Amazon and robots and machines being able to take orders and computers and the like, the need for tactical engagement and workers is becoming less and less. And when you also look at the fact that student tuition for colleges is rising, what you're finding is that students are often having to work while they're in school also. And so they're not getting the full college experience, the opportunity to find themselves, because you're taking classes and then you're having to go to work or to an internship. And I want to, journalism has not died out. I saw that question. I am in the communications field. Journalism has not died, but it's shifted.
Yes.
Significantly. Newspapers are closing shop, and traditional journalism as we know it is not as robust as it used to be. That's a fact. So I say all of that to say the experience is definitely shifting. You got students who are working full time. They're not able to find themselves. They're being asked to find themselves and know what they want to do and be able to project what career fields are going to give them the income that they need to pay off student loans. And so what happens is you get someone who goes to law school because they want to help disadvantaged communities. They go to law school, they get the degree, and they find that they have to work for a major law firm, and they don't get to use that skill set to help the communities that they want to help, that they had originally gone to law school for, because they need to pay off these student loans. And the communities that they want to help, the jobs in that sector do not pay enough to pay off the student loans. So students are having to make life choices about where they work, who they work for, where they spend 80 and 90 hours of their week in order to be able to pay off student loans. Again, the modern version of indentured servitude.
Well, Michelle, we're going to stick with that subject matter for a quick second, because I think you hit upon something that I want to ask you in particular, because we're talking about this notion of, socioeconomics, and you can't talk about socioeconomics without talking about race. I mean, because if you really understand history in America, there's some people who are poor, not because of things that they've done themselves, not because of their own volition, right? And so you've started a nonprofit organization that specifically works with Black women, empowering Black women, which I would even see that, expand that to, because you're empowering Black women, you're empowering the Black community because of who Black women are, right, for the community. I often tell my wife, kind of jokingly, you want something done, you ask a Black woman to do it. You know what I mean? Because you guys just get things done. So how does financial burden of attending college particularly affect the Black community, Black women in the Black community more than others? And what kinds of policies do we need to create to address those issues, to address those disparities?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that Black women fall in the category that women fall into, and that we are more likely to take on debt to graduate from college and not necessarily have the access to jobs or the capital or the support systems to be able to pay off that debt. And so that creates a financial burden that Black women have to shoulder as they, again, start to raise families and start to live their life after college. I think the challenge also that presents itself to Black women in particular is that they don't typically have access to financial streams to be able to pay off or even get access to loans. So that makes it difficult. And so you create situations in which Black women have to default on loans. When we look at the job market, if you just look at what happened in December of this past year, all of the jobs lost in December in the United States were lost by women. Women were pushed out of the workforce. And we know that was probably disproportionately represented by Black women holding frontline jobs who were cut from those opportunities of employment and work to be able to care for their families. And so I think what needs to change is we just need to look at the systems that create a situation in which Black women are funneled to seeking higher education with the aspiration of being able to get employment to take care of their families, but graduating with debt and not necessarily being able to actualize that aspiration in that there aren't jobs available, they're going to be cut from the workforce. There's a long standing wage gap for women and men, women's ability to make a livable wage. I think some of the ways that we cut those obstacles is we need to think and look at the role of standardized testing into colleges and universities. It's been said that the founder of the SAT, for instance, was a member of the eugenics movement, and that SAT tests in their origination were not developed to account for Black people and how they learn and what they learn. So looking at standardized testing, for instance, a number of law schools have gotten rid of the LSAT as a requirement to get into college.
Yeah.
We need to look at universities and their ability to take on transfer credits When I was a carpenter, I'd taken courses at the Metropolitan Community College in construction science, but a lot of those credits did not transfer. And so I had to take on more courses at the four-year university, Avila University, to be able to complete a four-year program. But a lot of the courses I took in construction could have been transferred or substituted for courses at Avila University. I learned advanced math. I learned critical thinking. I learned a lot of things to get this associate's degree in carpentry that could have been transferable to communications degree. So how do we make it easier for if Black women decide to go the community college route because it is cheaper and because it allows them to knock out the requirements without having to pay as much? How can four-year universities make that transition easier as far as taking credits and making it less costly to transfer?
Yeah.
And I think the financial literacy part that Joshua and Stewart brought up are very important. Making sure that people understand what they're taking on, whether they are just graduating from high school or a more advanced learner, right? They're coming to college a little later. Making sure they understand what that entails, I think, is part of it.
Yeah. No, you all are just, just saying so many things that just really resonate with me. Things that, I think about and things that we're trying to do even at Jewel, where, our admissions policy now is that test scores are not a requirement. Now to get into, certain scholarships, to qualify for certain scholarships or to get into certain academic programs, yes, we would prefer that you have taken the SAT or ACT. We found also, maybe the fact checker can help me with this, that is it true? I think I read somewhere in the last 5 years that students of color in comparison, do better on the ACT in relation to the SAT because of some of the things you said about the bias that is sort of just inherent in the SAT. But I would imagine that this bias shows up in ACT as well, but perhaps not as much. But I don't know, that may be something there. But you also said something about, women being, sort of left out of feeling the brunt of the downturn in December most recently, which, breaks my heart because, one of my academic, idols, I'd like to consider him a mentor, if you will. A guy named John A. Powell out of, he is the executive director of the Center for Othering and Belonging out at Berkeley. And I heard him say something that I never thought about, that when women entered the workforce in the Industrial Revolution in America, that's what caused America to become the world power that it is today. That when women entered the workforce, America then became the world power that it is today, this number one. So it really serves counter to America for women to not be in the workforce, right? It serves counter. So we need to figure this thing out. We have to figure this thing out. Allison, I see you popped on the screen again.
Yeah. Great stuff. Great stuff. I know that we're nearing our end of time together here, but I did want to make sure it's really important to the students that I worked with that we did talk about this nationwide establishment of a tuition-free public option at a community college or technical vocation school. We know that there's already programs like this in Missouri, for instance, for certain high schools, for certain types of students and across the nation in different states, but there's no federally supported initiative that allows free community college. And in fact, Biden talked about it at his State of the Union address last night. I was wondering, Preston, if you might start us off on feeling open to sharing just some of your personal thoughts from your research as well, what that would mean for the economy of higher education if there was a 2-year free option for all students in the United States.
Sure. So one piece of advice that college students will sometimes hear as kind of a money-saving hack is doing the first 2 years at community college and then transferring to a 4-year school. And I kind of want to provide a few words of caution about this. So this is a path that does work for some people, but I've looked at a survey of students who started as community college students in 2012, and they asked them, are you planning to enroll in this program and get a bachelor's degree within the next 5 or 6 years? And a bunch of them said yes. And they looked at them 5 years later, and only 16% of them had actually gotten the bachelor's degree. 44% of them had dropped out of college entirely. And these are not really the the results that we're hoping for when we say to people, do the first 2 years of community college. I think that it can work for some people, but we should realize that it is a hard route to go. If you're planning to do this, you should definitely have a plan. You should have your courses planned out exactly. You should make sure that you can transfer your credits to a 4-year school. And so when it comes into free community college at the national level, I do worry that if we have this 2-year free community college benefit, that is sort of the government putting its thumb on the scales in terms of which post-secondary education path is right for me. Free is a very powerful brand. People like free as opposed to, merely affordable or subsidized. And that might draw some students to the community college route. Some of them will definitely benefit from that, but I worry that the net effect is going to be more students failing to make it to the finish line because the numbers that we have already out of that sector are fairly disappointing. So that's in short, kind of why I'm skeptical of it.
Yeah. Now, Donnelly is a private school, but we are a minority serving institution and a Hispanic serving institution. So we would qualify for this program that was proposed last night. And even though that's true, I'm not a big fan of it as proposed, partly because of what we just heard, but partly because of that putting the government's thumb on the scale, and that's not for everybody. I think a much more productive step is something like doubling the Pell Grant. The Pell Grant program works very well. It goes with the student and it's means tested, so you're helping those most in need. And if you raise the Pell Grant significantly, right now it's enough to go to a college like Donnelly, but it isn't enough to go to a lot of other colleges. If you raise it significantly, that makes, for all practical purposes, community college free for those who are eligible for the Pell Grant. But we've already got a program that works. It goes with the student. It's portable. And I think that would be a better use of those funds than to just subsidize and choose winners and losers out of the higher ed world with the government deciding who wins and who loses. Especially here in Kansas and Missouri, think of all the small towns that have vibrant colleges, but they're private colleges that would, of course, have to go out of business if the government decides they're only going to subsidize and make it free for public. That would devastate a lot of towns and places that historically those colleges have served the state and the areas quite well. So I just think that I love the idea of putting more investment into higher ed and making higher ed more accessible and affordable, but let's target it to those most in need. Let's use a program that's already working and working well, the Pell Grants. And I would say extend the Pell Grants to DACA students as well. And that's part of what was proposed last night. So yes, but with some tweaks.
That really is music to my ears, Monsignor, because right, why not give that's equity. Why not give to those who need most as opposed to giving to all? And I think that we struggle with that as a country. We struggle with this notion of equality versus equity. Equity means that different people need different things, and it's okay that different people need different things. And also, we're woefully uneducated on how inequitable we've been in years past, and in providing, benefit for certain groups of people while we were not providing those same benefits for other groups of people. And so we struggle with that idea. So I know we've ran out of time. In fact, we are over our time. But before we, as tradition with American Public Square, we give our panelists an opportunity to have some final comments. And the final comments typically comes in the form of 2 questions. The questions are, so what? And now what? So I'd love for all of you to address those questions, and we'll start with Josh. This idea of, so we've talked about this. So what and now what?
On the so what, aspect. I think, and we've all talked about this, and I think that it's an important aspect. Post high school education, whatever that looks like, is important and valuable. And that idea of lifelong learning, I think, is valuable. So I think that that's a big takeaway. On the now what side of things, to students that are listening, that are out there, begin researching, begin asking questions. Make an appointment with college counselors if you, and if you are having a hard time doing that in your high school. The city has some amazing resources for any student, adult learners. Tap into the resources that are out there. One of the realities of moving forward is knowing what's ahead. And sometimes the way that we learn that is just simply to start asking questions and being open to asking those questions and asking for help.
Yeah, very good. So Michelle, so what, now what?
That's a good question. So what we are dealing with now is rising tuition costs and, $1 trillion debt being taken on by, again, students who are not even old enough to smoke cigarettes legally. I think that cuts to school budgets made by governing institutions. We look at the education cuts in Kansas that happened under the Brownback administration, education cuts that are happening right now in Missouri under the Parsons administration has led to students having to take on the rising cost of college, because colleges are having to pass those costs on to students. And so I think that we are in trouble as it relates to the amount of debt that students are having to take on. I would venture to say, in my own opinion, that's going to be the next kind of bubble burst that happens with these student loans that students are having to take on and are able to pay off. The now what is for students who are listening, don't be afraid to pursue, with all of the daunting information that you have about student loans, don't be afraid to pursue your dreams. And if it's not college, be okay with pursuing trades or whatever it is that will give you fulfillment. Again, to go into college just to make money is probably not the best use of your time, God-given intellect and passions. Figure out ways to learn what you need to learn, even if it means you have to go through a non-traditional route. If you are going the traditional route of four-year college or university, be mindful of the debt that you take on. Be self-aware about what that means for you and your future career prospects, and go forth and be great. And last but not least, advocate to your universities or governmental entities, your governor, to not cut the cost of college so that private schools, state schools can have the money that they need to educate you. I think Monsignor was right in that, whether it be increasing the Pell Grant amount or figuring out if schools can be free. Schools have been free in the United States. That is not a foreign concept. And if COVID has taught us nothing else, the things that we thought were not once possible could be possible, right? We need to look at different ways outside the box to ensure that our students and our future leaders of the world can be educated and not be saddled with debt that is crippling and keeping them from living a full life.
Great point. Preston, so what, now what?
Thanks, Rodney. So during this whole conversation, I was thinking about, well, if I were to design the higher education system here entirely from scratch, I mean, it probably wouldn't start with 4 years of college at the beginning of your 20s, maybe a graduate degree in your late 20s, and then work for the rest of your life. Because as we said, when you take a step back, yes, it is silly to ask 17-year-olds to make big financial decisions and make big career decisions when they're 17. And yes, the economy is changing. Yes, there are going to be new jobs that require new forms of training. And, I don't think, the traditional bachelor's degree is going away, but if I were to design the system from scratch, it probably would take the form of, shorter bits of training and shorter programs that happen, more often throughout your life, rather than just 4 years at the beginning of your career and then basically nothing after. We're not going to, completely overhaul the system now, but I do think that we should be thinking about how we can move a little bit closer towards that goal, whether that's non-traditional pathways, whether that's trade schools, whether that's apprenticeships, thinking about ways that we can move the higher education system more towards the needs of students, because I mean, at the core of it, that's why it exists. It exists to prepare students for life. It exists to prepare them for their careers. It exists to, you know, broaden their minds. It exists for students. And if there are aspects of it that aren't serving students well, or that are serving students in the wrong ways, I mean, that's the core of it. That's what we need to fix.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Preston. I mean, because, you know, I often tell students that the word commencement means to begin. When you graduate, it means to begin. It means to do something, you know, and it definitely speaks to, you know, Monsignor's point about this lifelong learning. And so, Monsignor, close us out. So what, now what?
So what? Well, we know the cause of the wealth of nations and the buildup of the common good. It's unleashing the great ingenuity and enterprise of the human mind. That question that Adam Smith asked in 1776 in his most important book for economists, what causes the wealth of the nations? We now know the answer. It's the human mind. And the human mind is a resource that needs training. It needs to interact with other human minds, to unleash that that creativity, that enterprise, that industriousness that fuels not just an economy, but fuels all the kind of enterprise that makes for better life. And the universities are also historically the place where a lot of our cutting edge research happens. So they're well worth the investment, they're well worth the time. But now what? We have to be better in discernment. As individual consumers, families and individual students have to discern what's best for them and their situation and their vocation. But we also have to bring that enterprise and industriousness to the question of college cost. And we need to bring it down relative to other investments in our society and find new ways of delivering that college experience that doesn't involve everything that it now does as far as cost and requirements. That will take some creativity and some I think bringing the best minds to bear on what is a better way of delivering the formation and educational experience that we'll all need to be the lifelong learners we're called to be.
Yes. So my response to that, you know, so what, now what, is to the audience and to students in particular, you know, get educated, but don't let the cost of college get in the way. Get educated, but don't let the cost of college get in the way. So, panelists, this has been wonderful. Thank you, Allison, for inviting me to be a moderator of such a esteemed, august group of intellectuals, and to talk about this most important topic, because for far too many of us, education is not just an educational decision, it is an economic decision. And so we need to make the right decisions when we make those kinds of decisions. So, Allison, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rodney. It's been an incredible conversation, and with your leadership and engagement on this, I think it's added so much value. So thank you, Rodney. And thank you again to our incredible panelists, Michelle Watley, Preston Cooper, Monsignor Swetland, and Josh Burdette for this amazing conversation. I want to express an important piece of gratitude to the amazing cohort of students I've been able to work with, from Mr. Bullington's classes at Paseo Academy of Fine and Performing Arts, Ms. Foster's classes at Crossroads Preparatory Academy, and Ms. Zimmerman's classes at the Barstow School. It has truly been my honor to work with you all to plan and execute tonight's program as a part of American Public Square's Civics Education Initiative. I hope you all are very proud of the work you've done throughout the school year to support tonight's conversation. If you in the audience would like to learn more about our work with high school and college students in the community, please visit americanpublicsquare.org/student. Again, to those of you in the audience, thank you so much for taking the time to join us for our final Student Month program in the month of April. I hope you enjoyed the dialogue and even learned something new. I'd like to take a moment to point your attention to an email you'll receive after the program with a link to a survey. We appreciate you taking the time to give feedback, as it helps us plan for future programming at APS. And finally, we rely on the support of our members to have these conversations. To those of you who are already APS members, thank you. And to those of you who are not yet members, I hope you'll consider joining this evening. You can learn more about membership at our website at americanpublicsquare.org/membership. membership, excuse me. Thank you all again so much for your participation. I hope you have a great evening and a safe and healthy spring.